Yep.
I love that we we just jumped right in there, and that's really, it's a small enough group that I think that we'll have enough time to jump in and talk about your fears or concerns, or if you don't understand some nuance that you just want to bring up that maybe you don't even think is relevant. I'm here for any kind of anything and everything. I do have an agenda to walk you through what you should be considering when you look at changing software and changing the way you do your business in any way, really. Whether it's a cloud, that's me. And so this is what we'll be going over is internal evaluation, evaluating your firm, the way you work, the security requirements that you and your clients have, and then we'll talk about, and that's really going to be the core of the conversation, is really that first part, because that's really the most important. You can't go and start choosing things to do and software to use if you don't know what you need and you don't know how you work presently. It's important to go in and understand that you have some things that you might need to improve upon before you can make this transition work for you. And it's over time, and it's absolutely tied to your clients' needs, their security requirements. So and you'll hear that some firms won't go to the cloud because of their clients, and really that's a conversation with each client at this point, and it's a conversation with your general counsel and that client, and about talking about risk. One of the really ironic things that I keep hearing is, and noticed when I was responding to these client security audits, is that banks don't want their firms to be in the cloud, although they're all in the cloud already. The disconnect is that law firms are being treated like a software developer or a cleaning staff or any type of vendor outside of the business, when really they only have a certain type of business with that client, and addressing really their specific needs and having that conversation is something that's happening more often. You get outside counsel guidelines that are very specific about security requirements. So that is really the key, is understanding you and your clients, and then going through practices that will ensure that you get the right product, that you have the right adoption for the product, and that you track it over time, and that you keep it improving. You keep making sure that it becomes part of what's built into the way people work, similarly to how document management systems came into law firms years ago. In that, I will talk about some implementation tactics, and then we'll talk about that it's not just one cloud, and when you give your network away, you still need to keep your own eyes on it. It's not all of security is not going to be on that cloud provider. It's a collaboration, and it's a constant support effort, and it's cyclical. So, any questions right off the bat? No? Okay. So, evaluating. So, security is, as we know, is a really big topic, and cybersecurity. Data breaches is one way that has gotten people's attention, and the privacy rules, including the GDPR, has gotten our attention in other ways. But together, they pose real risks that technology is not solving. It is no longer acceptable for a firm to have perimeter firewalls and controls and think that they could call it a day with security. The attacks are no longer happening at the perimeter. They're not attacking enterprises as much anymore. They're attacking individuals. And that means that each person at your firm can be that attack vector, and so we have to pivot from thinking about security as a barrier to thinking about security at an individual level. And so some of the practices that will be challenged in a law firm is who has access to the client documents, and how can we onboard a tax attorney very quickly if only this working group has access because of the client requirements. Is everyone with me so far? Great. So as far as, just to give you a few numbers, just to make it real, the Panama Papers, you probably heard about. Mossack Fonseca leaked 11.5 million documents, and it exposed 214,000 shell companies, and that was a law firm, and it was the largest data breach of any kind anywhere, and it was actually a law firm. And that was the day, that was the night my law firm managing partner called me and asked me about the budget I had that last, at the beginning of the year, because this happened in March. And he said, "You put all that in that you asked for?" I said, "Yes, I did," because, and it was a hard fight, because a lot of it's just insurance. I was getting questions of, well, how do you know it's going to work if we never get hacked? It's this black box, and but then that happened, and then I was asked, what else can you do? That was really one of those things. That same week in the New York Times, the Ukrainian hacker Oleris, there was an article on him in the top 25 M&A partners in the country, and they were targeted by this guy, and he had all of their information about them, their LinkedIn profiles, their personal email, their phone numbers, and the pitch by this hacker was, here's all this information on these partners at Lyle Gotchel, at Cravath, at the top 25 M&A. If you can get their documents, if you can hack them and get them to me, I will inside trade, I will make money, and you will get a percentage of the money on that information that we benefit from. So this is a real marketplace that's now happening, and really what keeps a disgruntled employee or anyone that is down on their luck from maybe taking advantage of this new marketplace that's out there. So with that in mind, we have to start thinking about restricting access to the data to the people that need it, and find better ways to onboard and offboard people and secretaries and assistants and paralegals to those specific matters. So that's part of what should be the consideration when you're going to a cloud product, is how is this going to work in our workflow for onboarding people, getting people access, taking people's access away. But to do that, you have to find out internally. You have to do an internal, it's almost an e-discovery of all your own data as if you were subpoenaed. And then you inventory that data. And that gives you a basis from which you can say, okay, we have some idea of we have some response where should we be asked about privacy. We can tell them we use this data here, and we don't share this data, and this data we share with a vendor, and you have to map out all of this because of regulations like the GDPR and the CCPA out of California. And they're the first two, but that is the trend. And it's not insurmountable. It's about getting every practice group, every business service group, whatever you call them, anybody that has a vendor contract, anybody that's getting information or giving information. So it's marketing, it's knowledge management, it's the library, it's the court reporters, it's everyone. And figuring out that universe of information that you're dealing with on a daily basis. Still everyone with me? Okay, great. One last note as far as why I think cloud is really critical and is going to, I think it's going to happen, it's going to accelerate pretty quickly, is we are in a really bad space right now with patching of the Windows desktops. There are new patches coming out every 2 weeks. And a typical law firm may have 80 to 200 different tools and pieces of software that integrate or that do one thing or another. And we used to have test environments where we could test the patches. But at this point, these patches are patches for security vulnerabilities, and they need to be applied very quickly. And firms aren't doing it. You know, when the information about the processor, the microprocessor vulnerabilities came out, it's not like we could just flip a switch in a day. So going forward, having things in the cloud means that that company or whomever can say there's a virus that just starts spreading. When it's in the cloud, you're in a centralized place, and the company, if they're monitoring their services right, they can shut it down, and they can patch and then bring it back up and be good again. In a typical law firm that has desktops and laptops, you have to go out and patch all of those machines to get them back up and running, and that's a big pain, and it doesn't always work right. Sometimes machines, for one reason or another, the patch fails, and you might find yourself chasing your tail for a few weeks until you have 100% compliance on patching. So it's one of the reasons why people are going to the cloud, because you can be more agile, you can rely on security experts to be able to update something very quickly and not have your internal people scrambling to get everything to integrate. You're still going to have integration issues, and that's something that is about you understanding how you work and where that information needs to go along its life cycle. So that's really the functional requirements, all of the legal operations, whether it's client intake, conflicts, matter management, docketing, all of that, news and alerts, anything to do with knowledge management and research. That's one bucket of information. Then you've got your finance, and you have all of the things that software can do for you, for time and billing, for tracking experience, for having better matter management, for being able to more easily allocate resources to a matter so that the right attorneys are working on the right matters. All of this, when data is governed better, we can understand how we work on our matters and how we can be most efficient working on them. And we have an opportunity now, as we're bringing in new systems, to embed that into the flow whenever we can. And that's the goal for me, is that there's this opportunity right now where we are changing. We are looking at new functionality. We're looking at mobile. We're looking at the cloud. And it's the time to look at our processes as well. If you've ever been involved, I've been through a few of them, new matter intake, conflicts changing. Has anybody gone through that in the last 5 years or so? No. So your conflicts checking is still paper-based, and everybody gets big reams of paper? Yes? No? Do we work for law firms? Okay, so conflicts checking is just one example of, you've got a lot of information that's very useful and can feed other information and can feed marketing and can be used together in ways that you haven't before. And when you look at cloud products, you're going to be seeing all kinds of bells and whistles, and you have to make sure that you don't go in saying, I want conflict checking, and then all of a sudden you see all this other project management stuff, and you're like, this is great, and then you forget about the thing you came in for. And that's when software isn't adopted completely, is when you don't get all of the needs of all of the people. And that's when the shiny, bright objects and the really cool things, mobile access and whatever it is, outshine other requirements that are just as important. But they might only be important to a smaller set of people. But you need to have those requirements ahead of time so that you're not having the vendor tell you what you need. You are going in knowing pretty much what you are trying to When you're evaluating cloud services, you also have to look at sort of the non-functional requirements. There are a lot of companies out there. They are running on different platforms of technology. They are pure cloud services, or they're running on Amazon Web Services cloud. There are different ways to deliver up these services over the web to you, and you need to navigate through those and understand the risks involved and the responsibilities that lie on everyone's shoulders within any of these choices. So whether it's a full cloud company that does their entire cloud themselves, or it's a cloud company that really just relies on Amazon Web Services, it's about knowing. And so much about this is from a risk perspective, and what General Counsel has always instilled in me is the more we know and we can demonstrate that we know and that we are doing everything reasonable, then the less chance that we have of being perceived as negligent with our clients' data. So the more you know about wherever, and that's what's coming up on security audits, and that's what's coming up with the privacy regulations, is show us that you know where our data is, and you know, it'd be a good idea to be able to be confident and say, I know exactly where your data is. It's right here, it's here, and it's here. It's here for 30 days, and then it's gone from there, and have that map. And to do that, you have to look at all of the operations that are going on, down to what every person is doing with any bit of information that could be useful or personal. So, as I said, spent a lot of time on this, and we can talk about specific products and functionality if you're interested, as far as the cloud and why the cloud might be better for document management or CRM or any of those. Big scale, the cloud is better for security reasons, absolutely. And then depending on what your needs are, the cloud might be the right route for you, or it might be a hybrid situation where some things should never be in the cloud for you. And most law firms put spam filters in the cloud many years ago with Google Postini, and now Mimecast. That's cloud service, been out there forever. So we're already out there. So as far as those cloud companies, their foundation, their customers, their competition, their size, their growth expectations, are they going to be acquired? Are they going to be around a year from now? You must have all heard this. Whenever I've ever asked to do anything, I've always been asked, who else is doing it? Right? It's a very common trait of lawyers to see who else is doing what we're proposing doing, and so that's part of that puzzle of finding the right cloud providers that are bringing enough value and that have a unique enough proposition that they're not going to be wiped out by Microsoft in 6 months. So that's part of the thought process when you go through that. Finally, I will change slides. So when we're selecting product reviews, as I mentioned, are typically about the vendor showing off their best foot and them telling you what it is that you need to do. And if you've ever been in a demonstration, you've probably heard, oh yeah, that's not out of the box, but we can customize that. There's custom fields, and that's all great, and it's true, and it does work. But the less customizations, the better, because they hold up moving to the next versions, they hold up patching, they hold up transitioning. So while you want to treat your law firm like the snowflake that it is, if you don't have to brand certain things and you don't have to be at the whim of every nuance, and you can get away with leaving things in this order down this side and focus on really the business stuff and not so much on the layout, you're gonna be in a better position to really look at what's useful for the product. And then if you've done the right exercise of discovering your processes internally and you have the stakeholders' input and you've found that maybe your document management system is used really well for documents but not so well for email, that becomes a functional requirement that you need better email management, whether it's filing on a mobile device, retrieving from a mobile device, automating that, having predictive tags, any way that can make email filing easier is one of those things that we should all be doing, because in essence, email is our most vulnerable state. It's on people's phones. If you have Sirius Radio on your phone, you can check the little security on Sirius Radio and it won't lock your phone. So even though you have a mobile device management software that locks your phone ostensibly after 15 minutes, there's all kinds of applications like YouTube and radio applications that will keep your phone unlocked, including Google Maps. So now your email is on these phones and you are in a cab making sure the cabbie's going the right way, and you get out and your phone's still in the cab, and not only that, the map's on and it's open. So now all those email are available. So the idea that MDM solves that is a myth. It helps, but the bigger picture is, why should that data be there in the first place? Let's make sure that only the stuff that they're working on right now, this week, this month, whatever that point is in their email account. Everything else should be more secure in a document management system or on a server somewhere, but not email. So when you're benchmarking, you have to look at these. And then demonstrations are really going to be more successful when your vendor is prepared ahead of time with your requirements, that there's been discussion with them over your direction, your strategic objectives, so that they don't come in and steamroll the meetings. You want to keep your people and your constituents and their needs at the top level and make sure that the vendor doesn't just get an open pass to start wowing people and getting people excited. You want to have the right demonstration. When you are ready to negotiate on a product that you think is going to work, like I said, there are the architectural components that you need to understand about the cloud, and from there, then you would understand what your responsibility is and who's responsible for what piece of the pie. When you're talking and negotiating with a cloud provider, these are the things that you need to make sure are in the contracts. That you own the data, that you can take the data out at any point, that if there is a charge for taking out the data, that you know about that ahead of time. And there are sometimes, especially if it's just cold storage. Say I have all kinds of old e-discovery stuff and I want to put it out in the cloud, but I don't want to pay a lot for it, then you can go a route where you put it out there for not a lot of money, but if you need to retrieve it, then you're paying for it. So there's ways to manage the spend to keep the cost down. Again, you still got to know what data you're dealing with, or it can be out of control when you put it out there in the cloud. Their services, whether or not they're using AWS or their own service, or it's really not a cloud service, but it's a Citrix server, and you're connecting in through Citrix, which is actually some cloud services. That's what it is. It's RDP, Remote Desktop Protocol, or Citrix protocol in. And you want to make sure that you're indemnified for any failure on their part. And that won't always be in there. And that's again about knowing what could go wrong and making sure that you would not be held liable for that. Now your reputation could be at stake, but as far as monetary damages, you should be indemnified of any kind of social engineering, hacking, breaches, anything that happens to that cloud provider or any of their downstream providers. So if they use AWS, that has to be part of the contract. If you're dealing with PHI, you should get a business associates agreement. That is personal health information, and it's an agreement between the vendor and you as to how that information will be stored and secured. And it's just an assurance document that's saying we're aware that there is personal health information here on our Dropbox site or whatever site you might use that's out there on the cloud sharing. That is a particular legal agreement that gives some substance to, again, the reasonable effort with which you are putting to secure this data. You should also understand if and how and under what situations the cloud vendors can have rights to that data. That is a big concern of the banks. If your data is in a cloud service that can be subpoenaed without your knowledge through Google or through Microsoft. Again, knowing is half the battle. And then it's about making that decision. Are we going to go with this vendor that could really hinder us, or do we have to find a vendor that will not have any access to information, and nor should they ever? And just an example of that would be like iManage, and you know, if you have iManage in the cloud, and there's certain things that they might be able to get to, but you have to make sure that they can't get to your data without your keys. And then finally, cyber insurance, which you mentioned earlier. I went through that with my previous firm, and I had a really great insurance partner, and it was with her help it was easy, but it was astounding at how blatant they were about not including social engineering in the insurance, when we all know that the majority of the hacks are from social engineering. So when you get to that point and you're looking at cyber insurance, and this has nothing to do with the cloud, really, this is just cyber insurance in general, make sure that your cloud service is insured properly and that you're insured properly, so that if something goes wrong, again, you have been you've done everything you can to keep things right. Any questions on that? I'm going to ask a couple. I have some questions here. So right now, would you say raise your hand if you'd be comfortable with telling your client exactly where all their data resides? Good. Half. Does everyone still have access to your document management system data, assuming you have a document management system?
What do you mean by everyone?
Any attorney can go to any client matter folder? No. You've reversed it, so now only working groups?
Yes.
Yeah, that's where it's all going. But it complicates things, am I right?
Yes.
Yeah. And that's why you're the only one in the room that's done it. If you were subpoenaed for data, that's sort of the same question, whether it's your client asking or not. How many have shares, like a Dropbox or a share file or something with their clients? You do. And are your clients required to use two-factor authentication or multi-factor authentication?
So we just said you can view, you can make changes, and here's the information.
Username, password, no multi-factor authentication. Yeah, that's
That.
That's not an easy thing to solve, because you're asking your clients to jump through hoops, and a lot of attorneys don't want to do that still. So you're not alone. I'm not singling you out. I'm saying that it's because of this fear of tarnishing client relationship at all. You know, the attorneys are not saying, hey, why don't we have a checklist online that all of the decisions are here instead of back and forth in these emails. No attorney, that even though you might know that's the right way to manage the information, nobody wants to tell their client to start doing their work differently, unless you can come up with something that makes it easier for their client. But so multi-factor authentication on these shares is fairly non-existent, and that's a problem. That's a big gaping hole. Another big elephant in the room is e-discovery data. It's not structured. It's got PII. It's got credit card information. It's got all kinds of salacious information, and it's out there on a drive, and it's duplicated because productions are made. So it's in triplicate, and in a lot of cases, everybody has access to it. It's a shared drive folder, and it gets dumped there, and then the review platform looks at it. Does that sound familiar? So that's a big bucket of dangerous information that you don't want to just lift that and put it into the cloud. You need to come up with a way to control those productions. The ones that are doing it in the cloud with Relativity, they're already on that path, because Relativity would make it too expensive for you to just store everything up there. But if you're not there yet, then that's the kind of practice that you have to think about changing, about how you deal with that e-discovery. So I've been talking about this the whole time, and what's new on this slide is nothing, really. It's a word, it's a different phrase, least privilege access. That is the concept. It's another way, it's called zero trust. We can't trust each other anymore, and we have to all build a firewall around each other, and that means only who needs it for only the amount of time they need it. Speaking it as the data, that's the only time that somebody should have access to the data, is when they need it. And if they don't need it a month from now, there should be something in place that triggers that change. And that is access rate auditing. And this goes way back. These some of my biggest heartaches were over access rate auditing in the past, when I put in a tool that looked at Outlook, and every secretary had access to the managing partner's email account because they worked from one day, right? One day 3 years ago. That's it. I mean, that's just the way we did business, and we got to start looking at it. It's the kind of thing you don't want to look at, because then you got to do something about it. But there are tools. There are expensive tools, and there are cheap tools. But there are ways to start to audit the access rights, and that's one of those things on the security audits that's coming up every time, is frequency of your access rate auditing, and even sometimes they ask for some type of proof, which, by the way, I've never shared anything with anyone, even over a webcam. I would make them come in, or over a webcam I would show them an outline, a table of contents of a disaster recovery plan, and that was it. I believe it's compromising the integrity of my security plan if I were to give all that information out to a client, and now I've lost control, and there's information there that can be used against me. So it's just one of those things that you should be doing this, but you shouldn't have to prove much to the client, or at least anything that could compromise your situation, your security. And then the compliance review is this really should be a circle, because it's you have to keep reviewing it, and you have to adjust to see where it's not working, why are some people still saving out to here, why are we seeing these exports, why are all these PDFs showing up here, maybe there's a technical failure from the last patch. And these are real things that happen. When I did an audit during the GDPR, a scan of all of our data, and we found all of these client documents in these cached folders that were from the web cache, Internet Explorer, blah, 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 and all this, very buried somewhere. And the product was designed to purge them, but it didn't. It didn't work, and nobody knew it didn't work, and it's just there. And so, without looking at what's out there, you might not see it until it's too late, until you're subpoenaed, and then all of a sudden you find the stuff that should have been deleted. Or you're subpoenaed and you hand over stuff, and then you find the stuff afterwards when it should have been delivered in the first place. So it's a ongoing effort, and it's part of what IT has to be changing to, is more compliance tracking. And it should be not just IT, but it should be part of the business processes that we all go through. That part of it is making sure that there's checks and balances. Again, it's zero trust. It's IT is overwhelmed. They can't do it on their own. It is up. They gave up a long time ago. It's up to every one of you. If you still, they've tried in some ways. Oh, you can't have webmail. It just doesn't. It doesn't. It might work and it might check off a box for a client, but it's really passing the buck. It's not really addressing it. It's because they didn't really have that much control without your cooperation. And to get your cooperation, you need systems that work and that work for you. And that's where you get into implementing. If you've done everything else, then you can hold the vendor accountable when you're implementing. If that one not so shiny object is in your list, it's going to be in your list here, and the vendor is going to be accountable for it. And what that means is that you get everybody's needs, at least the first round of getting their needs established. You have that, and then you got to see over time how they actually use it and what has to be tweaked to make it work right. And that's about training, and it's about incremental improvement. It's not just plug and pray or plug it in and walk away. It has to change to a systematic, understandable part of the way we do business. There should be a strategic vision from the top that this is part of how we service our clients, that this is about us doing right by our clients. And by the way, when we have all of this, we're going to be so much more efficient. We're not going to have to track people down for certain pieces of information. We're going to be able to do things on our own more and enable ourselves. So I got 10 minutes left. Do I have any other hard questions? No, that was the last. That was the bad one. Before I go on to some more security stuff, questions for me? Because, yes?
Do you see any big differences when you move everything to the cloud in speed?
Speed. That speed is it just depends. It depends on how old your existing system is. Speed is a different thing to different people too. Is it the speed of opening up the application, or is it the speed of going between a page, or is it the speed of when you print?
Just the functionality. So when you're working in your daily,
Is
working
it
on
just-
your computer, is it
Yeah.
having a server in the office? Is there a difference in the speed in the cloud?
I think so. Yeah, I think you could probably say that if you were to have an optimal system on site versus a cloud system, that a system on site is going to be faster. Yeah, but speed should not be the goal. Because there's a lot that goes into getting your job done beyond how quick you can click or move through something.
You work with the crew I do.
You were gonna say something about that?
Well, we just moved our email to the cloud, and it's slower.
Yeah.
And then it could be our equipment also. But I do notice, I'm like, hello, it's not, the emails do not open, attachments do not load quickly. And
Yeah.
And we're literally like in day 5 of this whole, transformation, but
And-
it's,
And it's Office 365?
Yes.
And is there a document management system
No,
attached? So just
no, it's just email.
with
Well,
Outlook? Oh, so
yeah,
just Outlook is
Just
slow.
Outlook,
So you're saying incoming emails are coming slower also?
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
You mean you get it on your phone before you get it?
Yeah, there's a lot of little tweaks we're still figuring out. There's a big
Having been a CIO for over 20 years, like when you said speed, it was just like part of me was just ready to just melt, because I've had this all the time, this back and forth about speed with people and what is speed?
Yeah.
And speed, it was fast. WordPerfect 5.1 in DOS
That was
was really fast.
No, but
And,
that's an issue, like.
No.
Email coming,
Right. Oh, and they're counting the milliseconds, and no, I know.
And there are certain parts of our group that, like, we have scrapers and things that are scraping certain things, and they have, like, seconds matter.
Oh, I
Yeah.
know, they're sitting there, but I didn't get it yet, I just sent it, calm down,
Yeah,
Count to 10,
yeah. So,
Count to 10, yeah.
honestly,
They won't listen to that.
it is not the same experience, and that's, I'm not going to paint it any other way. It's just that the desktop days are numbered.
Have you made changes to the desktops for new PCs? How old are the PCs roughly?
We need new PCs.
So you get the SSD drive and you have a
Right.
bigger pipe, really should be very negligible as far as what that performance
Right.
is. So you've got a lot go to the cloud and nobody complained about performance, so there's probably some tweaks that you point out.
Yeah, and our email boxes, between the folders and we save everything.
Which is another.
Thousands and
That's
thousands.
a great point.
Yep.
It definitely, the hard drive, even though it's in the cloud, makes no sense. Your local hard drive speed and if it's SSD is night and day. So it's not that all of your processing, all of your power, all of your money goes there. You still have to keep
The core.
the machines fast.
Yeah.
Doesn't really make sense to me. Having come into Avionics, that's where I've been in the other world, and it was through Citrix, but it was fast because it was a desktop. And then I went and I started using Office 365, and it wasn't great until I upgraded my hard drive to an SSD, and then it was fine. But just being as jaded as I am about the whole speed thing, I know that no matter how fast those hard drives are, we're all gonna have some issues with the people that ask about speed and are checking, did you get it yet?
Our
You can't-
generation is so used to instant gratification.
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know?
So I
You're
can't.
watching something, you want an answer, you go online, you get it, you
Yep.
know, you
Right.
don't have to get up, go to a book,
Yeah.
and you just, everything is there.
I remember
And-
the days going to Ding and Bull Library. and
Right?
looking up
Yeah.
cases.
Yeah.
Nobody does that anymore.
And when the big picture is that with the cloud and all of that, and with any kind of centralization, you have, when it matters is when things go wrong, that you can recover so much quicker. And things go wrong more often now because of hacks, because of things going on with how people use their computers. It's a tough, there's not an easy answer. The cloud is, like I said, the desktop days are numbered, and that's really what it comes down to. There is really little security that can be done at a firm level that can't be done 1,000 times better at Microsoft. To implement the types of controls that you would need, to stay secure and productive is just going to be more and more expensive over the next couple of years. That's maybe the easiest way to say it. And the convenience factor and the slowness is going to be the biggest hurdle. The not wanting, I think a good example is Gmail. People know that Outlook's better. They want to sort of use Gmail and they use it personally, but people know Outlook's better, and so we're still going to go to Outlook for a while. It works better, and so we're going to have to make those kind of changes. What's that?
I hate Gmail.
Yeah, exactly. And so, you got to find the right tools that are going to keep everybody happy and productive, and so speed is just one of those things that is really hard to fight. It's one of the toughest challenges because it means so many different things as well. But thanks for bringing it up. It's bad memories. So when you're now we're really short on time, but monitoring cloud services, it's what I have this on another slide, right? Now it's out in the cloud. You're still responsible for making sure that everyone has the right rights, that there's not data that's there that shouldn't be there, and that you're keeping on top of it over time, and that you're not letting it slide. Just because you're putting it out there doesn't mean it's their problem. The idea of the email administrator, now you have Office 365, now that email administrator become a business analyst, that's not happening. They're still going to be dealing with undeliverables. They're still going to be dealing with spam. They're still going to be dealing with administering some level, the user connectivity. There's still work to be done. So the idea that you're outsourcing it all is a misnomer. And that is pretty much saying the same things. We're probably going to be using multiple clouds, and so you have to understand all of the connectors, and you have to watch all of this, because like my Adobe Acrobat example, where these PDFs were piling up, things can stop